may not. So this has really been an exciting 7 weeks. We'll see how things go tonight. But I think it's going to be just fine. This has been just a culmination of a lot of effort. I think last week after we walked through the county courthouse, who here was just absolutely floored by the immense amount of effort all over, but it was just something. Because we're talking about a budget tonight, it involves numbers, and sometimes numbers kind of get people all riled up. And this exercise, I suspect will do a little of that. So, Jane, would you remind us adults what are ground rules that we established right out of the gate on session 1?
Okay, we use these ground rules. I kind of borrowed them from City Council because they use these ground rules. And also we use them in all the neighborhood councils. And so I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the final 8th session. It's fabulous. We had great attendance, and we really appreciate it, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And so anyway, we ask you to participate with active listening, make concise statements, be recognized before speaking, be respectful to the presenters and to each other, no profanity, no heckling, no personal attacks, and please be concise with your statements, like 3 minutes max, and at the very end, please take your binders home.
Thank you, Jane. So, who here has served on the board of directors in any capacity? Okay, so about half. Does anybody happen to remember any of the 3 duties that you would have to follow as board member? Okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Okay. Fiduciary. Executive.
Those are the branches you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. With fiduciary, what else?
Sort.
Okay.
So obedience is the first duty, where you are required to obey the laws and regulations that abide that you're supposed to follow. And you're supposed to adhere to the purpose of your particular board. The second duty is one of loyalty, where you ensure activities and the transactions are advancing your organization's mission and put the best interests of the organization first and foremost. And the third one is the duty of care, to ensure prudent use of assets and your people and resources. So no matter whether you're sitting on the board of a nonprofit or a PTA board, or in many ways what we as counselors do as legislative body, we are like a board of directors. And we have to all get along, and that's what this exercise is to do. We have to figure out what our guiding principles of our organization are, what that mission is, and so this exercise is part of doing that exactly. Now, you might remember last week, Commissioner Slotnick, he described county government very much like Nancy. He described it very much like a nonprofit, right? We have the programming and all the administration. Their job as administration is to do what? Anybody remember? The job of administration is to make sure that people who do all the programming have all the tools and resources they need to be successful in delivering their job. Meg Witcher, yeah, as a programmer, right, for the state of Missoula, if you don't have the tools to get people out and do what you do, can you be successful at what you do? No. Okay. So, Lee here. Tonight we got a lady working from our finance department. She's in the administrative end of the thing, and Jessica Miller, she's in the mayor's office, both administrative folks, and they have to make sure that Meg and everybody else that works with the city has what they need to do their jobs properly. Okay. Like mine. All right, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to have Dale Bickle, who is our Chief Administrative Officer. Yes, he's also an administrative end, go figure, right? And he's going to talk along and tag team with both Lee and Jessica about a little bit more about property taxes, because Property taxes are a sole source of revenue for the state. So with that, Dale, I'm going to take it from you.
So, and I wanted to do a quick introduction. We're going to try to go into this presentation in about 15 minutes. We're going to talk about property taxes and budgeting in 15 minutes. I did half of this presentation to a public administration class in 2 hours a couple of weeks ago. So this is going to be really out of touch. Jessica here is our citizen services manager. She does a lot of when we were presenting at council and all the PowerPoint presentations and all the data. Jessica is a winner, does a lot of that stuff. And she's going to walk you through the property tax aspects, how to do the tax bill, and all those things. We, our finance director, is going to talk about the budget, our budget itself, where the money goes, and I'm going to close with our budget process and how the budget talks about it. So, Shirley, Jessica.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is property tax appraisal. And so much of the amount of your property tax is determined by the value of the property. And so it's the State Department of Revenue that actually determines what that value of your property is. They do those appraisals every 2 years now. It was on a 6-year cycle, and so folks in 2017, a lot of folks saw a big jump because it was in 6 years since the last appraisal. This year, 2019, is an appraisal year. These notices will probably be going out in June, and this is something that's determined, again, by state law. There's a 30-day protest period when those appraisal notices go out. So if there's something that doesn't look right on that appraisal notice, property owners have 30 days to get in contact with the state about that. So one thing that you'll see here, this is the 2017 appraisal notice. They have the previous assessed value and the current assessed value listed on there, and the assessed value is the market value of the property. And so, if it's going to sell for $155,000, as this one shows, then that's the amount that you're going to see on that appraisal here. That determines the taxable value, which is just a set percentage of this. It's 1.35% of your market value, which is taxable value. And it's the taxable value that's going to really kind of determine what you guys end up paying in property taxes here. This portion here where they have your estimated general taxes, that part is just an estimate, and that's based on the number of mills that all of the local jurisdictions levied in the previous tax year. So in this case, in 2016, the combined millage for this property here in Burbage County, and so that would have been the city mills, the school mills, and the county mills. That totaled 835, and so that gives them an estimate of what their property taxes will be. But this number will not be determined when they send out this notice. This number won't be determined until all of your local government agencies actually adopt their budgets and determine how many mills they're going to do. So that's just an estimate. So again, those will be going out in June, and folks who are actually property owners should pay attention to that and take a look at that. And on your tax worksheet on the back there, you've got a list of references here. And down at the bottom of that, you'll find information about how to find the information about your property online. So you can check and see, if they think you have a 6-bedroom house, you really have a 3-bedroom house, that's going to be something that's going to determine that value. So you can find their property information on there. Okay, so next, you should all have a property tax bill in front of you. Anybody want?
Can you look up anybody's property?
Yep, you can look at anybody's property online. That's all public information. Sales prices are not public in Montana, but all of your tax data and your appraisal data is public information. And it's all available on those websites. Okay, so this is a sample property tax bill. Obviously, you can't read it from here, which is why you have one, and it's still small. So what we've got up here in this portion of it is these are the items that are levied based on that taxable value of the property. So this is, you can see that there's a section there for the city, section for the county, and the section for schools. We've got some special districts, which is Mountain Line up there, and then we have local schools and state schools where we've got some equalization and some things for the university system. So all this up here, these three entities, or all these government entities combined, levied a total of 922 bills. So this amount up down here is reflected in that line up there. This portion here in the middle, those are the special assessments. Some of those are based on the value of the property, so the city road and park districts are based on the value of the property. Some of those, like the water quality district and soil conservation, those are a flat rate for each residential property pays in the same amount. So those are the two types of things. Some of them are based on the value of the property, others are not. This portion down here does show that taxable value and market value that was sent out on the appraisal notice from the Department of Revenue. By the time you get this tax bill, it's too late to protest for that tax year. So again, that's why property owners need to be watching for that to be coming in June. So this shows your market value and your taxable value. And then what you'll see here is these numbers for that taxable value is taken, is multiplied by the total number of mills that the city, county, and schools have assessed. We multiply that by the taxable value, we divide by 1,000 for long and complicated reasons that we won't go into, and then that shows your total tax amount that comes from that district there, not including those special assessments.
I have a question. Those taxable value and market value right there at the bottom, the exact same that came on your notice?
Yep, the same that came on your notice from the state. Okay, so here you can kind of see the division. We have all the numbers up here. This shows the percent that you pay for each of those entities that went in there. So everything that is on that full tax bill that I gave you is reflected on here somewhere. So for the city, we've got our general fund, which was in that top portion, and we've also got our road and park districts, which was in that special assessment section. So this 29% of your total tax bill goes to the city, and that includes our general fund, our roads, and our parks. County is 19%, 19.6. That does include the Fort Missoula and open space bonds, which were voted in by voters. And then our special districts include the Mountain Light Urban Transportation District, the Soil Conservation District, and the Water Quality District. And then we've got local schools and state schools as well. So the city is a little less than a third of your property taxes. And in this chart, you can kind of see over time, so this is the total number of mills that the city has levied. And again, the mill is just basically a vague word for a percentage of our taxable value. It's just a unit of money that we use. And so you can see the city mills are in green, and all the other jurisdictions, which is going to include city, county, and schools, is in that tan color there. And you can see that they've both kind of increased at the same rate over time, that everybody's kind of had to raise their taxes the same amount as we've gone on. And this is one we like to show. I know a lot of folks have seen the headlines and stuff in the paper and then various other news media about Missoula has the highest property taxes. What a lot of those folks are commenting on is the number of mills that we assess. And so that can be kind of misleading, because in Missoula we have this number of mills here in the red, and that's that part that shows in the top portion of your top property tax bill. And then in the tan here, we have our districts, which is the road and park district. And our road and park district are comparatively small compared to what other cities around Montana do. You can see that the tan portion of their section is a lot larger. And so they've got a lot more special districts that they use. They've got road and park districts, they've got stormwater districts, and they have a larger percentage of their budget in those districts. But when you look at the total dollar amount that each community is collecting per capita, Missoula is pretty well in line with all the other communities. We're, fairly middle of the road as far as the amount of revenue that we receive for each person who lives here in the city.
And this isn't adjusted, right, for anything that's coming back from the local option sales tax?
Right, yeah. No, none of these communities are eligible for local option sales tax. Local option sales tax is only available to resort communities, so they can only be 5,000 people.
It's not in households just like this?
Right, yeah. Here we like to show the percentage of the tax base. I know that property owners, residential property owners, are starting to see a little bit more of a property tax increase over the last couple of decades. And the reason for that is a lot of changes in the tax base. So some of our industrial has gone away. Some of those industries that we used to have kind of disappeared. And in addition to that, the state has shifted some of those burdens toward residential properties. And so they've reduced the amount of business income equipment tax and commercial taxes and stuff like that. So you can see over the last couple of decades, residential property owners are paying a lot higher percentage of property taxes. And so that's another thing that folks kind of get impacted by. And then here, this top line here, so this blue line.
You have a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just want to clarify something. I think I heard you say that the state has done that.
Yes, largely, and some of it again is industries going away, but the state has in their laws created a shift where they're the ones who determine how much of that market value goes to the taxable value and what the tax rate is on each of those categories of property, how much, what the percentage is for residential taxes versus commercial versus business equipment. And they have reduced business equipment. I can't remember some of the
The tax rates are made to, the central assessment industrial properties,
Right.
There's been tax cuts in those areas, and that is, by law, is a shift to residential taxpayers.
And the centrally assessed includes things like Northwestern Energy and the big utility companies, the big telecom companies that are kind of statewide, and then they're sort of not really assessed county by county, it's assessed at the statewide level, and they kind of divide it. So that's what that is.
Would it be safe to say tax increment financing has reduced the commercial and increased the residential?
Not in this, not the way this is displayed, no, there wouldn't be a distinction between tax base that's in an increment district versus outside an increment district. This is all taxable property within Missoula County.
But tax increment financing holds the commercial down, right?
No, it doesn't. It freezes the tax base at a certain level at the time the increment district is created. Any new taxable value goes up, is added to every time it stays in that district. So the commercial property within that district pays the same amount of tax, whether it's in an income district or outside it. It's just where that tax is distributed. So that wouldn't.
This is our entire tax base. Tax increment would be, a portion within this. It's not removed from this total number.
Can I circle back on one thing? I apologize. These percentages are Missoula percentages or state percentages?
These are for Missoula.
The Missoula
Yeah.
County is the city.
I think we're the city of Missoula. Yeah, specifically the city of Missoula. Okay. So this one, we get newly taxable property every year, which isn't the portion of it that is, it's not the portion where city increased taxes or the value of the property increased. This is the stuff where there was new construction and we're getting new revenue from new sources that we didn't have before. This blue line here shows that value of newly taxable property. And then the top line there is the average that we got in new revenue every year before the recession. So prior to the recession, we were getting just under $5 million of new revenue every year, which means, it's not you, the property owner, are paying more money. There was a new multiplex that went up, and that's where that revenue was coming from. Since the recession, our 4-year average here is this brown line, and we're just under $2 million. So in our new revenue, we're getting $3 million less each year now than we were before the recession. So as our costs go up, some of that new revenue that we were expecting and counting on is not there, even though you drive around town and you see construction everywhere.
Is there something specific that happened in 2010 that shoot up?
2010, off the top of my head, I can't really recollect, and it looks like more like 9 was an exception there, with the exception in that point, and then, I think that this was kind of, as the recession was hitting us sort of in pieces, and maybe 1 or 2 big projects was finishing up, and then it went down from there.
One of our challenges related to a graph like this, you can see those spikes. It's very difficult for us to project, and we try to build models around our building permit numbers and what we know what's happening in the community, but it's very difficult to predict.
for us to predict what's happening.
So we see all this construction going on, we expect our newly taxable revenue to be pretty high, and then it comes in quite a bit lower. And then this is the value of the mill. So the mills that I've been talking about, what that is that's a percentage, or it's actually 1,000 of all the taxable value in the entire city. And so it's 1/1,000 of all the taxable value in the entire city. And this is the value of that mill as it's gone over the years. So you can see again here where, 1 year a mill might be worth, this much, and then suddenly we have, a negative 2% value in that mill. So the value on that can really jump up and down too, depending on how much the property in Missoula is worth. So that can be as well.
Change, not the value.
Right. So this chart here is a percent in the change of the value. Yeah. And then I'm going to turn it over to the let's talk about budget.
So I wanted to just give you sort of an overview of the budget and the size of the budget, and I want to start here with the FY19 revenues. This is for the entire city. So the entire city has 163 funds, if you consider those sort of cycles of activities that happen. And within that, there are 5 enterprises, which are include 3 utilities: the water utility, wastewater utility, and a stormwater utility, and 4 component units, which are legally separate organizations, but for which the City of Missoula is fiscally responsible for. So this includes the Missoula Development Agency, the Parking Commission, the Business Improvement District, and the Tourism Business Improvement District. So this is $165+ million in revenues right here. Keep that in mind. It covers absolutely everything in the city. So these are the entire city, again, expenditures. These are actually $171 million. Yes, that number is higher than the revenues because a lot of those funds brought in fund balance, money that they had from prior years. These are the categories, these are sort of general categories of expenditures that follow certain accounting rules to categorize things this way. You can see some overarching things here. General government, public safety, public works being some of the largest categories that we spend on. But the places that people are mostly interested in are the general fund. So the general fund is where a lot of the actual activity, a lot of what you expect the government to do happens. Excuse me, let me look to my notes and give you the size of that. I think it was $56 million in 2018. And you can see here, taxes and assessments make up a large portion of this, and do not go back to this. I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah. So one thing I want to show here is this is the general fund. Taxes and assessments making up such a very large category, and charges for services just under 11% there. But if we go back here to the entire city, you can see charges for services at 26%. I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because that goes back to things like those utility charges for services that are, for those specific activities separate from the general fund activities. Here we have general fund expenditures. Fire department, police and court. This is under that umbrella of public safety. And those are some of the largest operating expenditures that we have. Community development, administrative services, looks like a big chunk there that covers basically everything you have to do to actually run an organization. We have finance, we have IT, we have HR, it actually includes the attorney's office and so forth. Public works, parks and recreation is a large chunk there. Debt service is a pretty small chunk. Council Mayor's Office, and health, that's actually an expenditure, a contribution to the health department.
Where would Mountain Line be in that?
So Mountain Line is not in here, because Mountain Line is actually their operating budget to that county, and the city does not levy for the taxes that support Mountain Line. We do have a contribution to Mountain Line that is paid through the general fund, and that I believe is probably going to be in community organizations or community development.
Mountain Line is its own government entity, and they're allowed, they have their own, their board of directors set their own money.
But you gotta get money somewhere to run it, and I just wonder where it comes from.
It's mostly property tax.
That's the same.
And that was a separate portion, you saw that here on the property tax bill, they're actually a separate portion, and so you see we've got city over here, and then we've got Mountain Line as a separate portion there. So the city does make a small contribution to Mountain Line, and that's one of those smaller categories up there. But the bulk of it comes directly from this portion of your taxes.
And that's why schools are out in there, the same reason schools and counties.
Yeah, right, their own, no, this is just city budget today.
So what's the total budget, 165 million for the city, what's the city plus county total? That's what it is.
You know, the county budget is probably in the neighborhood of 140 million. And then the school district, I don't know, it's going to be substantially larger than the two. They're going to be separate. They're self-government as well, and they're definitely
Yeah, so big numbers there. Following up on general fund expenditures, these are service trends. So this is directly related to those budgeted expenditures that you just saw, and what folks expect government to be providing. Police calls for service, fire department responses, storm sewer maintenance, developed park acreage, asphalt prices, the multiplied asphalt prices, and street miles. So these are some of the trends that we see and the costs to provide those particular services.
For the city itself, not the county.
Correct. Yeah, we'd like to talk about other budget tools, I think.
So I was going to do, how are we doing on time, Mr.?
All right, so can you talk about zero versus performance-based budgeting?
Sure. You know, I think we hear a lot about different budgeting techniques, and there's some of the things that we do out there related to budgeting. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about zero-based budgeting and performance-based budgeting. And so the city of Missoula's budget is done on a performance-based budget, and what that means is if you look at our budget online, all of our department heads produce a performance measure that they're tracking every year, and our budget is built around that. So what I would say is that, you know, we track those over time. We're trying to understand trends, to predict what our costs are going to be in the future. What we're not really doing is saying that, you know, if the police department doesn't write X many tickets, there's a consequence to that, or, you know, something like that. But we use a lot of non-financial statistics in those, and so to try to get performance, and so we can use things besides just expenditures versus budget, you know, actual expenditures versus budget to measure our performance. And then zero-based budgeting is a technique where you would, in the absence of everything in the history, you need to understand what level of service that you want to provide, and then you would build a budget to do that. And so it's like a rethink of how you approach doing business in a particular area, and that would be a zero-based budgeting. How we approach zero-based budgeting is trying to do formally. I mean, in the real world, that's hard to do because we have contractual obligations, whether they're union or anything. We have state law. We have all of these things that make that impractical, and it's very expensive. So we look at we try to establish formal levels of service regarding our thing, and then we build a budget to that public. You know, we've done it in a public process. We've established this level of service we want to provide, and then we need to build our budgets around that. Most recent examples of that are in our utilities. We just did a water utility facilities plan and a stormwater utility facilities plan that's identifying for the next 5 years our capital projects related to those plans and those estimates, and we'll build our budget around those in the future to make sure. And we're doing it in our programmatic areas too. We're getting ready to do President Wolf to have a consultant help us with police calls for police levels of service. And as we're a growing city, those are the type of things. So how many officers we need on the street, and it's very detailed on what crimes are we going to investigate. Are we going to every single police report are we going to investigate, and what type of level of service do we want as a community. So that's how we approach the zero-based budgeting. And, saw a little bit of benchmarking we do when we compare ourselves to peer communities that run per capita as an example of that. But that's the quick and dirty piece of some of the things we do besides our just line item budgeting, which we do too, and all of these are valid techniques and all of them are incorporated into our budget process.
And I think that was really the point, that we don't use just one of these in isolation. We have a toolbox, and we use it for different purposes, and I think that is what you're speaking to. So, thank you, Dale and Jessica. We are now at this point that the mayor comes forward and presents his executive budget.
Which he's not really going to do. Try as they may to script me, it's impossible. What you have before you is an example of what I might deliver to city council. So a couple of things that I keep in mind. I'll be delivering my 14th budget to the Missoula City Council this summer, and it all starts with kind of what I think of as the 4 P's, right? Public safety, big one. Public works, parks. So those reflect community values, right? You can't have a city if you don't have a public works department, which is roads, streets, sewers, water, all that stuff that we use every day. You can't have a community unless you have fire and police protection. So that's public safety. And in Missoula, you can't have a community without parks. It's a huge community value, and the community is elected to invest in parks and recreation and open space over and over again. So those are some assumptions that we make, and then the final P is people, right? You have to have human beings to do all of this work. And some of those human beings exist in those other 3 Ps, and then we've got lots of folks who are doing all the work that allows those departments to work every other city department to work. And every year, what you will find, I think, tonight is that there will be general agreement on about 97% of the budget, and about 3% is what you're going to argue over. And in the large picture, it doesn't seem like much, but it's a big deal. It's the way we move forward incrementally. We do that with people, we do that with projects, we do that with equipment, we do that with buildings, we do that with acquisition, and ultimately, you're making choices at the end of the day that what are a product of tension, and that tension is how much is the community willing to pay? How do you measure that? When is enough enough? Is enough ever enough? And what's our responsibility as elected officials to deliver the services based on everything we know, despite the fact that you'll hear from folks that they don't want to pay any more taxes. And so what you have before you is the nuts and bolts of what we do every day, and we make a bunch of assumptions going in. We have union contracts, we generally know what we're going to be paying people. In this case, our last contracts were 4 years, so we had 4 years of pretty much knowing what we were going to pay people. We generally know what utilities are, we generally know what cost of rolling stock, cars, equipment, all that stuff is. And then departments come to us with, here's how we can do more and better. And we want to do better because somebody has told us they want more and better. Anybody here would like fewer potholes? Right? That's a thing, right? So how do you get there, right? That's one of the questions that we'll have tonight. Somebody's going to ask for something. It's going to be a human to do the work, it's going to be a piece of equipment, or it's going to be material. You want more parks. It's going to be acquisition. It's going to be staff. All of these moving parts are what you get to consider, and none of it happens in a vacuum. I've got staff who have expectations, wants, needs, and desires based on both how they work with their colleagues and how they interact with the public, and what they hear from the public, and what those folks want. We hear from constituents what they want, what they're interested in, potholes, et cetera. And I have goals, and council members have goals as well, so it's all in the mix. And then we get to make choices. We have a limited ability to tax, we have a limited ability to raise fees. And once you're all done here, you have to present it to the public, and you have to be accountable for it, and you have to deliver on it, right? And I get a performance review every 4 years. Council members get the same, similar review. And this exercise informs that review. So I hope you enjoy the exercise as much as I do every year. It's among the most important things we do. In some ways, it's the least interesting thing we do, and sometimes it's one of the most creative things we do. So, with that, budget away.
I'm going to ask you a last field question. We have building the buildings. We protect our roads, trying to keep safe, the fire department, trying to keep things safe and all. Who or why doesn't the city get involved in the safety of power poles?
The safety of power poles?
Yeah.
So likely not our jurisdiction, for one thing.
Who's this?
Well, it's the utility is responsible for them and they're regulated. Is there something in particular about power poles?
Well, I have a power pole in my backyard, and I mean at least 15% for years and years.
Well, Jessica
There's
is
7 tags on it.
Jessica's right here.
Inadequate power pole, and yet we aren't doing anything about it because the pole is owned by the telephone company and only occupied under agreement with the telephone company by the power company. So nobody will do anything until it falls down.
So,
Cause damage.
so the beauty of having Jessica here is she is not going to call, well, she can get more information from you than she can call Northwestern or whoever. You can advocate. We have no legal authority, but we can advocate.
Good question.
All right, so now I'm going to ask you just to stay with me for just a couple more minutes here before we dive into our next project, because once we do, it's going to get noisy in here. Because the acoustics are not quite built for groups segments here. But I wanted to point out, we have Stacey Anderson, another councilwoman, she represents Ward 5. She, along with everyone who's stood up so far, along with Glenn, we're going to be milling about to answer any questions that you may have. Now, before you pull out that yellow sheet of paper that I know has been just, you've been dying to turn over, this is going to be your budget. Each table, you have a separate mandate from the next. And your mandate, don't turn it over again. So, each table has its own mandate. So, table number 3, your mandate is that you have the ability to raise taxes up to 3%. Table 2, you can raise taxes by 2%. This table here, 1%. 4 is actually negative 1%. Oh, yeah. And 5, you have to keep your budget at 0%. No increase, no decrease. Okay? So, when we get done in 30 minutes, we're going to, each table is going to require a presenter to talk briefly for 5 minutes at most about what your group came to a chance of decision making. Okay? So, now you may turn over your yellow sheet of paper and I will keep talking. All right, so we walk you through. Left side, we have in gray at the top, assumptions. So your budget is $50 million. You get 2 assumptions built into this model. Number 1 is that there is inflationary pressures of 3%.
That covers your personnel, your contractual agreements for all of your union workers, as well as all employees. Plus material and utilities that are charged to the city roughly go up 3% each year. That equates to $1.5 million. Okay? The second assumption is that newly taxable values that Jessica had talked about a little bit before. Remember back when we had $5 million coming in? Now it's down to $2 million. All right, so what that means is that if you go down to the bottom left where it says expenses in a box, okay, you see 50 million plus $1.5 million. That's $51,500,000. That's your total expenses. That newly taxable value I talked about, $2 million, is actually falls on the revenue side of the equation, which is the box that says revenue to the right. Okay. Everybody with me so far? All right. Now, I'm going to move you back up to that gray box at the top. Our population, 75,000, we think you'll get. But then we talk about our general fund revenues. Now, roughly 60% of our revenues comes from the taxes. We briefly discussed that. And the other 40% comes from other fees, etc. We're not going to reckon with any of that. We're just talking about the taxes side of things. So, if you are taxed with a 1% increase, so you get to raise taxes, that's for every 1%, that's $300,000 in additional revenue. If you have to take money out of the budget, 1% decrease is a $500,000 reduction in revenue. And you can see along the top of your sheet what your dollar figure is for your percentage. In the two boxes below that, we have constraints and areas that we cannot mess with, like state law, regulations, etc. But we can affect what goes into the 4 Ps that we have talked about. Public safety, parks, people, and public works. Okay. Now in the new request box, this is the typical thing. Every department head, as you probably all came to see, would like to do more, but it requires what? More money. Yep, exactly right. So you get to have the wonderful exercise of figuring out which requests are valuable to you as a table, and still goes back to your strategic framework of what you're trying to achieve in terms of making sure that you uphold your community's values and mission. Okay? So, your job as each table is to take your revenue box, where it has a revised revenue, which now you see at 52 million. And now you have to figure out what you're going to spend your money on. So in your case, we just take one time. Okay? Begin.
Are they not going to go service the media for some of the time? Are they not going to partner? Are they not going to mow the parks? You know, whatever it is, you have to figure that out. And the other thing is, for the new requests in the areas of constraints, so anything having to do with the municipal court or city's attorney's office, they get it. Always send them up. Okay? Under the law, they get it. And they, you know, we make sure it's reasonable, but yes, we cannot deny the request. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Wait, so all right, so I'm something floating around.
To the man and not hire him.
Right. Let's put it another way.
Last time, or? That was intentional.
Yeah. The revenue is coming in with some different numbers. So, Heather's going to tell you all about it.
So instead of $2 million that we had considered, it's only $1 million. I know, yeah. So now you have to do some number crunching the difference. Take $1 million off
no.
So now we have, we can't have anything, we have to cut. Yeah, we have to cut 500. So we're not adding anything. Yep, great. But we have to cut more than 500 because we have to.
I don't think we're all on the same page with that. I think since the request, it's just we can't cut the service. I don't think there's a. I don't think we can say we don't have to add to it.
You were saying that these constraints cannot be cut. If there is a new request under here, you have to grant them.
Okay,
Yep.
every single one.
And you can't, I wouldn't recommend cutting from these departments. You're gonna have to cut from the other. Okay.
So, but like the police officer lives over here.
Correct.
Okay, okay, okay.
Like city attorney,
Okay, got it.
judge,
Those three have to go. I mean, they have to.
have to go with tax.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't see anything else.
Right.
And you have your information sheet here, so.
Right. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah,
That would have been helpful.
I feel like their budget's done because
We have to cut the things.
we can't use things, so we just have to.
We have to give them our donation.
Are we allowed to increase the tax fees?
Park fees, impact.
Let's do it now.
There are many silos, and we are just in one silo right now.
So we can't generate revenue at all. We can only cut. That was the discussion that we were getting at. We're zero.
You cannot raise or lower taxes, so you have to make your budget fit what that income is. But, yeah, we're not, okay, we're taking us out of the box.
Right.
Right. But not for the simulation.
Okay, okay.
All right. So, well, then for the simulation, from what I've seen, I feel like they're all equal. So it has to be equal. That's what I really do think, you're going to be, I do think one of the things that's going to come up
We just got insurance out when for all wind damage from one of our storms recently. You get to add $200,000 revenue.
Still can't.
Right.
But it is one-time deal, so this cannot go towards anything that is continuing expense.
We're still,
Right, right.
yeah, now we're cutting 480. Thank you for the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that way we don't have that.
I think we should just give that $200,000 to the parks.
I mean, it's only 763,000 for all the one-time things.
So I put these white ones on the table that may be helpful, and may not. It's pretty much the same, but now I've shown like now all the other news flashes.
So that means there's no more news flashes.
No more news flashes.
I mean, we could ask,
Or did they get your answer questioned about like what?
yeah, just make it up.
It's up to us.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna get creative.
There we go.
We could, not do all the improvements.
What about an equal cut across the board, percentage based? And everyone gets an equal cut in all of the.
But are all departments equal?
Now, which police officers and firefighters are you cutting? And are you union? Can you by the union contract? Can you do that?
Well, you don't have to necessarily cut positions. You can cut.
And fund, so
You can lay people off the unions.
last person in is the first one out.
Well, I don't think it necessarily has to be FIFO, first in, last out. First in, first out. Can we get everybody to take a 1% salary cut?
No.
Yeah, people are going to be real happy about that.
That's one of your constraints. So I took one budget year. We were in a world of hurt. I was able to do a contract holiday. So all unions agreed to take a 1-year holiday under contract, no raise, and bought a year on the back end. But it was a tough sell. So we got
I mean, a 1% cut versus somebody losing their job,
I'm not gonna lose my job though. It's that guy.
where's your camaraderie?
Oh,
Family spirit.
I don't know if it has to be jobs though, with people. It could be training budgets, supplies and equipment budget, it could be that sort of stuff. It doesn't have to be people.
Well, so basically, with everything shakes out, we're 200,000 in the hole, right? So as of now,
I think we're
because we're at 51.3, and we need 51.5 as our expenses. Because we went from being down, because we were at 500, then we dropped to where we didn't have any, we were right at 51.5.
So you're at a negative 700,000.
right. We have to add these two together.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That's right. So we shouldn't worry about any of our requests and just figure out where we're going to come up with the 700,000.
We can't use this money for ongoing things, so it's sort of, I think we should break it out, which means we're really $1.5 million now, and we should use this one-time money to fund the one-time requests. Otherwise, we're going to end up, next year's going to be even harder.
But then we still have our shortfall.
Oh yeah, and more of it. But I don't think we can bake this $200,000, or I don't think we should, into like general ongoing maintenance costs. This stuff, or even other stuff.
Yep. So you're going to have to take that negative 700 and figure out how to divvy that up.
Yeah.
Between the two departments. And Meg, I'm sure it's going to petition not hers, right?
Yeah.
Probably not, but
It's easy. I mean, we could just sell a portion of Port Missoula Regional Park.
All right.
Subdivide it.
Okay.
So I don't know. What's the best way to get $700,000 out of those 4 departments?
I think you have to cut the general fund by $700,000 and redistribute. Keep the personnel, but cut supply budget shorter. Supply material, training, travel,
Yeah.
conferences, all that stuff's got to go out the door.
So are we just doing that across the board then, like 100 and what is it, 125,000,
Yeah, I think that department heads
175,000?
Department heads have to submit a way that they
Write proposals, things
what are mandatory based trainings that they have to send people to.
And also like any bigger projects, any bigger expenditures, they would have to submit for approval. That's what we had to do at the university in the dark days.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be a person.
Right. No, I agree.
It affects the people because it's like job quality.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be do your job with way less.
With way less. Like you're a government worker, you're already getting paid far less than a private counterpart, and especially in Missoula.
So that would be, so I guess basically what we would be asking people to do is, cut your expenses to a bare minimum, and then they'd also probably have to find ways,
Well, and I would
sell
look
all
at-
the police motorcycles.
I would look at size of the department based on how many people, like Parks and Recreation I think outside of Mountain Law, it employs the most number of people out of any other agency within.
Equivalent FTE or number of individuals?
Number FTE and not intermittent employees. So like I would have to think about how many people are under each department, and then it would be a percentage based on how many people work for the department full time. Is what you have to cut your materials, training, all that sort of fun stuff. Because it would, you have to cut by -1%, so that's to come up with 700.
And we're having a hard time since we don't have the current budget. We're having a hard time knowing what.
This is a hard task, and the budget is so big, we couldn't
Right,
spend
that's
hours
fair.
on it. I think what you need to do is just specify how much from what department, and you give some direction to the department head as to what's going to be cut. Is it going to, the labor contracts are in place. You can't mess with the salaries, but you can cut FTEs, or you can cut equipment. Like if it's parks, what services are going to be cut? Programming, maintaining the medians,
mowing for the summer.
We could sell all the motorcycles this year to make up for it, and then next year buy all new ones.
It's hard. I mean, this is hard. Ours takes 2 weeks instead of once a week. So I think come up with some, public works. Are they going to do less road repairs and less snow plowing? They can't. I mean, you have to decide what's going to happen. So, for the purpose of the simulation, just broad strokes.
Okay. I think less mowing seems better. So let's just.
If you guys are basically in the role of city councilors, and you're going to get voted out. Just know if you aren't careful about how you cut. So. Sounds like a thankless job anyway.
So if we gotta do 700,000, do we do 2221 or?
Out of where? Police, fire, public works?
Yeah.
I would take a bigger chunk out of parks, and that's the honest part.
And public works too.
Yeah. So police and fire, so if it's,
So how do we?
So 700,000, I would do.
100. So instead of getting 100, we're cutting
1, 2.5.
Yeah.
You have a point person?
Not yet.
Let's be Nick.
Right?
What do you do?
I guess, right? So is that what we're gonna think it? 2.5?
Wait, public works.
250 out of public works, 250 out of parks, 1 fire, 1 police.
Yeah.
And then no new requests.
No new requests.
No new requests, and then also, getting department heads to, instead of looking at cutting personnel, cutting training supplies.
Anything we can, right?
Yeah.
All right.
No fun.
I know this is not going to be perfect, but that's what life is like sometimes, right? So we go through a bunch of season, and it is always filled with surprises, and that's kind of what you guys have to experience a little bit. Sometimes the numbers work against you, sometimes they work in your favor. So what I'd like is a gold star first to the first group that would like to present.
Wait, do we get to make public comment first before they present their budget?
Yeah. Do you have any public comment that you want to add? Oh, okay. Nick and then Elaine. Okay. And tell us what your mandate is.
All right, so our mandate was to cut by 1%, which is $500,000, which we struggled with, obviously. One of the things we had is we didn't know any specific things that we might cut, so our sort of, as went to broad strokes. We're going to cut $100,000 from the police, $100,000 from fire, $250,000 from parks, and $250,000 from public works. And we're going to have those department heads come to us with sort of proposals on how to do that so that we can maybe make a more informed decision. Talking about maybe like mowing and maintaining parks a little bit less, like a lower quality. And also encouraging them to, instead of like trying to cut staff, but to cut things like training and travel and supplies while we work through this so that folks keep their jobs.
Great. Thanks, Nick.
All right, Elaine. All right. So group 2, our mandate was to raise taxes by 2%. So we feel pretty good about what we accomplished here. So we can fund all of the constraint positions. We were able to add a full-time police officer, a full-time city planner who will hopefully increase revenue for the next year. We were able to replace the Salem sewer line and fund the Missoula Aging Services Meals on Wheels. We did end up 5K over. However, we decided that was budget cut. But we also pointed out that by having these people, at least for the hourly employees, you don't have to pay time and a half, so we figured that all works. But we could not, we were unable to do sidewalk improvements, which is a big problem for so like pour one out first.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, we had a mandate of 3% increase, so we had life easy. And it's easier for me to tell you what we didn't fund than what we did fund. So we didn't fund motorcycles. That's the only thing in that first column, and then the second column, we didn't get a new fire engine. No sidewalk improvements, sadly, and lateral bucket truck. We didn't do that for public works. No aging services, and that's it. The rest of it we funded.
All right.
And I don't know that we had a really good strategy. It was like hectic, but we ended up with something.
No, I think starting old people is the way to go.
All right, okay. Our mandate was no change, and by the time we received all of the news flashes, we were needing to find $430,000 in cuts. But after much discussion, we tried to look at the new requests and consider what might actually generate revenue if we didn't cut completely. And so we decided to commit to the long-term maintenance fund of currents and splash, as well as the failing sewer line at a Parks and Recs facility, which meant that we then took the remainder, which was $380,000, divided that amongst the 4 general fund departments, people, public safety, parks, and public works, and decided that we would disperse that equally. None of us felt like we were going to fight for one particular department or another, but to spread out that cut amongst all 4. Okay. Other platform. And last but not least, what do we got this year?
So we had a mandate to raise taxes by 1%, which, after all the flashes, we think came up to $100,000 tax we had to make. And so we looked at the $1.2 billion of new requests and $100,000 of cuts and focused on that. Excuse me. Yeah. I say $100,000 of cuts, $100,000 of new funding. I'm sorry. We had $100,000 to play with. So we focused on the $1.2 million of new requests to use that for that. Like everybody else, we said the failing sewer line. It's just everybody wants to think of that failing sewer line. So we also wanted to get that thing fixed. We also thought we should remove the old playground equipment. That was a liability, according to the pink sheet, that we were worried about incurring costs at. We did think about creatively, could you reuse our old playground equipment to make a snowplow or something like that? But it's not going to put it on eBay or somehow get some revenue off that. But no, so that was an easy one too. And then there was a $25,000 for bumping up that judge to full-time. We had 2.4 FTEs, so this would make them full-time. It seemed like a nice way to, since we only had $100,000 to play with, we were trying to use some of these smaller, high-value ones. And then the other one was $50,000, a big expense, was to bump up and hire half of that FTE police officer, the $100,000. We'd say we can't spend it fully, but let's see if they can play with $50,000 to make it worth their while. So that was our deal.
Peanut Gallery, do you have any questions for the participants about this process?
Was it easy?
No.
Even with raising money with it, or being able to spend more money, I mean, was it, what was the decision, like, how did you value things in terms of when you were looking at where to put the money?
We're trying to find things that will still generate money, their position. So we figured estate planner, if we can get more projects through by having another plan in there, that'll increase our revenue. And then also with the police officer, we're saying, like, if they're working all this overtime, cutting down on their time and a half would also help us to save money in the long term. So even though we have to spend, we were still looking at saving.
Did folks consider one-time revenue versus what you were funding?
some of these funding asks are, you hire a person, you hope to be able to hire them.
That's why we didn't fund the motorcycle. Seemed like it's a little bit per year, but it was over 10 years, it's $250,000. So we said, let's not open that door because it's so much down the road too.
Commit yourself.
Right.
We talked about how those motorcycles are useful less in the year,
Right.
during the summer, so.
Did anybody take that new request figure and divide it by 75,000?
No, sorry, I can't hear you.
Did anybody take the $1.2 million that we had in total new requests and divide by 75,000?
The number of people.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. What did it come to, Alina?
$15.
$16 per person each year. Just to kind of put that into an interesting context. But, so we had to go through this process because we elected officials don't have the pleasure of just being able to always convince people that all of this means something to all of us. So I think we've all come to understand the value in each one of the departments. And we didn't even hit them all, right? There were some things we didn't even get to in our whole series that aren't even represented here. But it's very interesting, I guess, lesson to think that what may be of critical value to Meg might be very different or to Jerry. And we have to recognize that we go through life at different stages throughout our communities and raise families. Sometimes we don't. But it's really critical that we take into consideration everyone's needs and not just what we want. And that's what government does. Because a lot of people have a lot of needs that they can't take care of themselves. And that's why government is the entity that looks out for everybody else. And our job as elected officials, we have to try and make sure that we try and cover all those bases as best as we possibly can. It's not easy. We wanted you to find that out firsthand. But I hope you walked away from this whole experience thinking you know a little bit more than when you first walked in on day one. So we're at a point where we're going to need to open it up for a group discussion. And Bryce did us a huge favor and went to his employer and asked if he could bring some beer for us. So where did that all go? Okay. Oh, we'll put some on the table. Crack one open if you wish. You don't have to. I need it. But now I want you for the next half an hour to just kind of talk about what you found valuable in this whole experience, or whatever you want to talk about. I sent you home with homework. Please leave that behind, because I need that feedback. And before you actually hand it in, remember last week I said there was a line at the very bottom under the special section? And that was on that blank line, that if there's a person that you want to meet with from all of our presenters, I'm sure they would be delighted to spend coffee with you or what have you. And we'll give you a little one-on-one attention. Additionally, on that blank line, if you would be willing to sit down with the press, they haven't been able to join us, but if you would like to be interviewed, please write yes or click no. Not your kind of thing, and that's okay too. It's on the back side of the homework. And it is now 7:30. I think we're going to try and get you out of here by 8. If it runs long, that's perfectly okay. But one more thing. As a token of my gratitude for all of your efforts in coming each week, the after-hours session group, raise your hand if you attended one of those after-hours sessions. So we came up with a tagline, our choices, our cities. And then I asked my daughter Thea to do a couple of logos. And so I printed out some dish towels. You all need to pick one. Here's the different design.
So maybe you can color coordinate with your kitchen or do whatever you like, but yeah, come take a look. There's a couple of different choices. And you can do that whenever you're out the whole half hour or thank you. Yep.